Welcome to Marketing Demystified, the podcast that connects the dots for business leaders to drive revenue through effective marketing strategy. We chat with marketing experts on different topics that will help you ramp up your revenue. We stream live on LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube, and you can listen to us on your favorite podcast platforms. Marketing Demystified, the podcast, is presented to you by GrowGetter, your partner in growth marketing. And here's today's episode.
Hello, everyone. Are you ready to be inspired, informed, and empowered with practical tips to boost your marketing efforts? You are in the right place. Welcome to the very exciting 100th episode of Marketing Demystified. I'm your host, Jenn Mancusi, CEO and co-founder of GrowGetter, your growth marketing partner. So excited to have this conversation today. In the early days of generative AI assisted content creation, it was very common to throw a prompt into ChatGPT and use whatever came out. Basically, create what we now call AI slop. If you're still doing that, no judgment. But after this episode, please go check out our conversation with Ethan King on how to personalize AI content. It's a really good one. But for today, most would now agree that AI content needs a human in the loop. But what does that actually mean? Is it a quick pass to remove the obvious AI clichés? Is it a full rewrite? Is there a special process that separates good AI-assisted content from great content? Spoiler alert, there is. And today's guest has that exact framework. My guest is Julia Porter, Fractional Head of Content, here to talk about what she calls the judgment layer, the human thinking that surrounds AI and helps content teams consistently produce better work. Julia walks us through the 5 things you need when co-creating with AI, from defining what quality looks like and challenging briefs to improving feedback, aligning messaging, and diagnosing why content falls short. Julia, welcome to the show.
Jen, thank you so much for having me, and congratulations on your special milestone for the podcast.
Thank you so much. Thanks for being a part of it. I'm so excited to have this conversation. And I can't think of a better topic to be covering. AI in content is such a challenge right now. Everyone wants to use it, such a time saver, such an efficiency builder, but there's a lot of wrong ways to do it. So
everyone's got a lot of ideas about it as well. So how to use it, and it can change everything, but it's not as easy as it looks, for sure.
For sure. So let's talk about your framework. Very excited. As you're thinking about AI content strategy right now, what's the biggest problem that you keep seeing? And how does the judgment layer framework that you're using help to rectify it?
Yeah, I think, when I was thinking about the framework itself, and this comes from my background in running content teams over the last sort of 7-8 years now, like I said, there's so much appetite for scaling content using AI, but how do we do it in a scalable, repeatable way that gives you good quality? And that's, good quality content. That's what we want to get at the back end of it as well. So, again, when I talk to senior leaders, everyone's having the same conversation, teams, producing more than ever. We've got all these different tools in place, but the content just doesn't feel right, doesn't look like our brand, and doesn't feel like it's something that our audiences want to consume. So coming up with that framework really was, it's not about, everyone's trying to do a great job. It's not about effort. It's not about tooling. It's the judgment. So what that means, the kind of documented system, process, and talent that you've got in place that knows what good looks like before you even bring AI into the picture.
Yeah, it's that like strong foundation in what is good content before using the tool to help you get there.
Yeah, exactly. And I cited in a LinkedIn post, I think there was one that really got a lot of traction, was a stat from SEMrush recently that they analyzed 8,000 job listings for content marketing. And you can really see this huge shift happening in the marketplace where there's the middle layer of teams. So between the head of content role and your kind of junior producers or AI, this layer is being stripped out. And my position on it is it's having a massive impact on teams' ability to be able to create that quality content. You've got these very senior, huge growth. I think it was like 300% growth since 2023, and kind of a senior VP of content but then they're kind of stacked without the mid-level generalist role, which doesn't sound too exciting. I think it's a little bit, doesn't do the role justice, but that mid layer that has dropped about 70%. So they're missing this middle layer that is disappearing now, like that can actually catch poor judgment, understands the real context in the business. And I think a lot of businesses are struggling with that right now. I thought that stat really sort of brought that to the forefront.
Yeah. And I think that's a challenge that, content aside, AI is kind of creating this job challenge where whether it's that mid layer or even that kind of entry level layer that companies are trying to replace with AI and in a bunch of different roles. And I think the challenge that creates is more of a long-term development challenge. If you don't have those entry level folks coming in and learning the role and the foundations, or those mid level people developing that judgment, then you're not going to have any senior people pretty soon. They don't have that experience because they'll just be over relying on the output of AI, which, like you said, it doesn't sound like us. It doesn't feel like us. It doesn't, it's not differentiated, and you can spot it from a mile away now.
Yeah. I think you're touching on something really important. Yeah, as you say, not just for content, but for industry, but marketing overall. So you're right. I'm a massive believer in AI powered content for myself, for how I use it for my clients, and then for the teams I've run. That's the only way that we've been able to scale out content production, really. But I think you're right. And if you don't have that grounding in the craft and understand like how to produce great video, how to create great assets, writing, how are you supposed to then think about optimizing processes and using various tools, including AI, to scale that? It's really tricky. So you've got to make sure that, part of the framework I've put together is around feedback. And you see, as you go through it, it's actually like just good training as a leader, like spending time with your team on, helping them understand what does taste, what does judgment mean to this company that we're in and to you. And I've definitely had the most success when I've been hiring. I think the best thing that you can do is find someone who's curious, someone who's got that kind of growth mindset. Like, I was reflecting on some hiring decisions I'd made, and I was like, if I'd start it all again, I was painting a picture of like a new content team. I would start with that one bright, curious, mid-level generalist role that's going to kind of want to explore, test, and iterate. But the judgment, that curiosity is something that's inherent in us that AI can't, yet replicate. And we put those tools to work then ourselves.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a good lesson for life, is to be be curious in your work, and especially now as we're working with these tools that might be new to some of us. To get curious about what good looks like, and really spend some time with it, and don't just use whatever it spits out. I want to talk about taste. You mentioned taste. A lot of teams are using like maybe brand guidelines or brand voice and putting that into their training their tools with that. But you've said that's not the same thing as taste. So can you talk a little bit about what that means, and how it's different from the guidelines that maybe people are using today?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I was thinking back to exactly that. Brand guidelines, a really good set can really set the core foundations for good content, or, asset creation for marketing. Unfortunately, like some of the times they're kind of created this beautiful deck and on a SharePoint somewhere that's hard to find and can date quite quickly, and very like visual. This about the design aspects, etc. And not a lot of teams get that time and space to really think about, okay, this is a brand guideline. Usually it's been designed for a person. What does that mean for AI? So then, you're thinking about the guidelines overall. I came up with this like simple taste document, which is something that's a collaborative, simple framework that teams can use to really define what taste looks like for the company you're in. So you can have taste as in my personal taste. I love, going to French restaurants. I love great wine, but that doesn't translate well, especially at a fractional level when you're working with multiple clients. You've got to be able to quickly adapt to the taste and kind of like brand feel not just how it looks, but how we write. And especially as AI is helping everyone scale content production more quickly, you got to think about how you can apply that at scale. And when we've tried this out, I think it's an exercise. One of the questions is like, how would you describe this brand at a dinner party, to kind of like, set the scene? Like, what would they be? What would they be doing? That's very interesting to get the answers. But it's good because then the way it's written, structured down, it's not just for your team members that are doing the work, it's for AI. It's written so that AI can parse the content, can follow these guidelines, so that when you're loading it into, whether it's loading it into your instructions or giving it as context, the output you're going to get is so much richer and more on brand. So you're spending less time in reviews trying to nail down like why that doesn't look and feel like us, or getting things stuck in review loops. So the taste documents are definitely supposed to be complementary to like standard brand guidelines, but designed for the humans and the machines in your team. I think that's how the modern marketing team is evolving.
Yeah, that's such an interesting distinction that, the voice principles that might be within brand guidelines, it might say we're authoritative and we're, human and accessible or whatever. And that doesn't give enough information to AI in terms of how to structure your sentences or what words to use and not use. Because I think that's the thing that people get caught up in a lot is, the M dashes and the, it's not this, it's that, the sort of like telltale signs that something's been created with AI. But even removing that, it's still maybe not feeling like it was written by you. So those guidelines needing to be like specifically for AI versus guidelines that are for humans is a really interesting kind of parallel that has to happen at the same time.
It's been really helpful, I think, to kind of, and you touched on a really important point at the top, and then like, it's really important way of helping people use AI confidently in their process. That's how I've always guided teams. It's like, it can be part of your process. It's not, for me, it's not the end product. If you put something in and verbatim copy and paste something over, that's not craft, that's not the work. And not everything needs to be labored over for days and days and days. But if you think about it, what's the most precious thing in everyone's life at the moment? It's attention and time. And you're asking someone to spend time to consume, whether it's a funny meme or whatever it is, you're creating a 20-page white paper. It's someone's, they're trusting you with their time and attention. So the way, again, the taste document is really helpful in grounding teams and the machines, but like, it's also, again, in the process, going in and thinking like, how are you using tools to draft or to create like MVPs of landing pages, etc. Like, it's more powering your thought process and your ability to create content in a way that you may not have been before. Before the tools we've got, that I can create versions of websites that I could never have done without a whole dev team behind me before. So I think it just helps, rather than there's that limitless possibility for companies that need to stay on brand and on track. Like, it gives that kind of like North Star and spine to work off. Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. I'm curious what you're like, how you feel about like trust in the outputs. Like, we're going to talk about, feedback later and some of that stuff, but or maybe we can jump right into that now. But when you put these guidelines, brand guidelines, voice principles, now taste documents, how much do you have to then check and make sure that it's actually fitting in with what you've asked it to do? Because anyone out there who's ever used AI knows that the feeling of like, no, you're just telling me I've asked you 3 times to change this and you're just doing the same thing. And it goes, you're right. I am,
We'll do it. Yeah, it's a very important one. Looking at it, we could spend the whole podcast talking about that. But if you think again, like, trust is so important at the moment. Think about like, who do we go to for information? You see, more people going towards individuals to people, whether it's on social, whether it's news outlets. Like, we go to individuals that we trust for information. So, we've got that responsibility to create that, whether it's content, deliver those experiences that, whether it's copy, whether it's the stats you're using. I really think that our roles as marketers are just evolving into more of a reviewer editor type of role, or like how I position it in my offering is like an orchestrator. You're kind of like pulling threads together, and part of that then, when you've got all these different component parts, you're listening to sales calls, customer proof points, something interesting from a customer story or an event you've been to, and then, you know, again, like maybe there's something weird you layer into the mix to make it uniquely your brand. That is something that is uniquely, you know, a human reviewer or creator needs to do together. So I think it's super important. I'm surprised there's not more on social of like fails where people have left instructions in verbatim. I think maybe we're all a bit scared of doing it, so no one wants to call attention to it. But I've definitely seen more and more of, you know, global brands, you know, doing analyses and content, and then just either the stats have been hallucinated or the actual instructions have been left in, and the copy editing is just not, it's not been caught. So I think it's super important. I don't think teams are trained enough on good editing and good review. And I think we're all kind of figuring it out as we go. What does this look like? You know, I'm less of a writer, say, more of a reviewer, but, you know, what does copy editing, and, you know, again, so that's part of what I think as a leader, you have to carve out that time and curating the taste, but also those skills so that they know where to go and how to do it in a very systematic, repeatable way. And then the last thing I'd say, something I implemented in when I was at Optimizely, and then at Personio as well, my last head of content role was, you know, having it on a structured, like a quarterly rhythm. So, you know, at the beginning of the quarter, end of the quarter, at least, very deep dive, like we pull a selection of the assets that have been produced and spot check them, and then have like a kind of like rubric to score them against. You know, does it, you know, is it accurate? Is it the design? You know, all these different variables, and then give ourselves a score going forwards. And then, you know, you soon see, as you start to do that with different people creating content, it can be very easily, you know, go off track as well. So that structured review process is really helpful because it kind of avoids the inevitable, you know, reactive review, shall we say. Maybe someone comes in, a person sends something over, and it's like, where did this come from? So you've got that proactive approach. I would definitely say that's the responsibility of the leader in the team to say, look, we're going to do this on a, you know, on a proactive basis.
Yeah, for sure. It's so important, because otherwise those horror stories like you've seen of things being in there that shouldn't be, that weren't caught, that, you know, could be very damaging to your brand. But I know also that a lot of times the output is really dependent on the input at the beginning, right? We talk a lot about prompting and the right kind of prompting. But in content, it's usually a content brief, right? So I'm curious what the brief kind of discipline layer looks like in practice, and what do you want to see in a content brief template that gets all the information that you need right before you then, like, where does that step fit in with your process with AI?
Yeah, anyone who's worked with me knows I'm a big brief obsessive, whether it's a big campaign brief or even down to like an article or something that we're writing. You know, you've got to be able to, if you can articulate the point of view and get it nailed, like the argument, what you're making, the value back for the reader or for the consumer in a plan on a page, then that honestly saves so much time at the back end where, you know, often big teams are working together and someone suddenly is like, well, no, we didn't say we were going to do that. We all align on, you know, a framework of a brief. And I would say certainly thinking through the way I see, you know, a huge use case for AI is repurposing. So if you think about what goes into the initial brief, like great source material, and what's great source material, it's something that's unique to you and to your brand. So if you're recording sales calls, if you've got Slack threads covering, you know, tickets and issues, and, you know, all the richness that is so hard as a human, you can be in the threads and you can be reading them, but you can set up your kind of like automated workflows to analyze those for patterns. And then, you know, you've got your external ones where you're looking into the market, seeing what's going on. but then also doing a bit of it yourself as well. Like you might have been in a customer call, or you might have spotted a pattern here, and you're like, okay, this is why we're going to spend time creating this asset. If you do the work on that, and I do have another framework and a matrix, the impact signal one, that's really helpful to think about, like time with your product team on the data, or have you got any like unique industry perspectives that will, quantifiably like add value to the argument you're making. Then AI can take all of that and repurpose it into packaged, per channel, and turn it something into video, etc. But it can't yet come up with that uniqueness. So I'd say in a brief itself, it doesn't have to be war and peace, but it certainly has to be enough. Like a good template would help me see like the why. That if you can't say in 2 to 3 sentences what the purpose of the post or the thing is, then we need to go back, articulate that clearly, and then I'd want to just see a lot of that context, the reasons to believe, the proof points, and then performance data as well. It's pretty foundational, but like I think you'd be surprised how quickly I've seen us skip into because there's so much pressure to produce, just quickly throwing something in and getting quite thin content back.
Yeah, for sure. That's I think that alignment at the beginning of the purpose is so important, and also like what success looks like.
Mm-hmm.
So important, because otherwise you can do the most beautiful piece of content or marketing campaign or anything, and someone will say, well, that's not what we were after, if you haven't agreed on what you were after in the beginning. But I think the source content piece that's something I feel very passionately about.
Mm-hmm.
That is the differentiator between asking AI to write me a blog article about, content strategy,
Right.
and versus you kind of either talking or writing and remixing. There's so many opportunities for source content that you probably already have. Maybe you were on a webinar or a podcast, or I love the idea of taking sales calls, recordings from sales calls, and looking for themes across different challenges that people might have. I'm a big fan of, people who listen to the show know this about me already, going for a walk with the dog and talking to myself in my AirPods for 10 minutes.
Love
right?
it.
Love a voice note. And that is the source content. Tell your stories. That's the thing that Claude or ChatGPT doesn't have, is your unique experiences and anecdotes. And that's actually, if you're looking for content that's going to perform, if the objective is, blog articles that are going to get cited by AI or, show up in Google search, that's what's going to help the algorithm as well. So, it's just, so the source content cannot be skipped, just cannot be skipped. It's the number one thing, in my opinion. And if you don't have it, it's very easy to create source content. Just tell your stories.
I think you touched on a really good point there about AI, powering if you've got an enterprise plan for AI as a team, we can talk about the individual level as well. It's much easier, but taking that time, I think certainly at the kind of like leadership level down to document your brand purpose, I know we've got the brand guidelines, but like, again, there's a lot of like lived experience we all work through with companies we're working in, but actually how are your tools supposed to know that if you don't? And so again, I've worked with another client, like spending that time where they voice note, like literally get it all down, pages, like notes and all the context, and then loading that in. Then it can be kind of, and then you're getting more into the kind of automated, fully to partially automated place of using AI. So I think that's super important as well. And again, it goes back to, I don't know, you also have trained, work with teams to think about like pillar content and then supporting content. Not everything can and should be a pillar. This is not, AI specific. It's just thinking about it helps, other teams understand as well. You create your pillar and then you create like the supporting assets around it can be repurposed. It can be like, drawn from that first piece. But if it's a pillar piece, it takes time and effort to create something that's quality. So yeah, it's kind of grounding principles, but still, again, when there's so much pressure to do more, actually, why, team, you need that reminder, you need that time and space to create something good.
You absolutely do. And I think the other thing that some people sort of forget is I think people are doing a better job of training their skills and their agents and putting all of that in, right? But then it's done, right?
Yeah.
I've trained my agent, it's done. And there's no new kind of like adding to it. And that was one of
Mhm.
the things that came up on my episode with Ethan King was he's like telling his AI stories every day, 15
Mhm.
minutes a day, just like feeding it new content. And I think that's one area that you could easily like feel I think there's a lot of opportunities to feel like you've done it right and then move on to something else. And you maybe are like 80% of the way there, which isn't a
Yeah.
bad thing. There's no judgment here, but there's always more that can be done. And that context, those anecdotes, those stories, those sales calls or whatever, that like such great content to continue feeding into the machine that's just going to make it better and better as an
Yeah.
output.
I love that. And also exactly that. Like I went back and read through my global instructions in Claude, I don't know,
Mm.
6 weeks ago. And I mean, so much has changed since I set up my fractional practice and, having to go back in and update even just those very basic ones. But that's, again, like the foundation of everything that's coming out is coming from those instructions. So I think that's really important. Another bit I talk about back to like taste and judgment as well is like if AI is supposed to have given us all this time back, which I don't think it has. I think it's just, it's great, but it's driving up everyone's kind of anxiety levels of thinking more, like when is enough? And the thing is, there's never enough. It's up to you to kind of like say, using it to help you achieve your goals. But one thing I really try and instill in myself and then teams I'm working with is the dedicated time to like, how do you nurture your own judgment and taste? So like, how often do you pick up a book? How much do you go and look for quality things, take the walk, like pattern spot, let your brain breathe a little bit. So then you're not just from like a wellness perspective, but actually intentionally thinking about how are you building your own judgment. So it's not just something that's lived, experience. So it's hard. It really is difficult, but actually putting some like high level goals sort of to say, what, like, I'm going to read this, go from this quality reading list. I'm going to watch these things. It'll help improve my brain and give me the space in my day to think and reflect as well.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. The like you said, pattern recognition, like going out in the world and
Yeah.
having new experiences.
Yeah. Because if you
Very
don't do
valuable.
it, exactly. If you don't do it, then think like all you're doing, you're in a room, you're pulling from other people. I mean, the context is good and it's fantastic for the source material. But if you're never having something new, how are you going to keep evolving and how learning? It's I think for the right people, it can be exciting, and then others, it can feel quite stressful and challenging. But I think the ones that are going to thrive in this world that we're in now is that curious like growth mindset. You have to find a way to make it kind of work for you and what you need to do for your work as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, let's get back into our process. um, so, going back to the kind of review, I know we've talked about this a little bit, but there's very often, we get things back from AI and it's off. It's
Yeah.
off. We don't know exactly what that is. That's where your feedback language layer comes in. What does that look like day to day, and how does it change like quality control for
Yeah.
content as a team?
Yeah, I think that at the individual level, it's so important. Again, like when you're doing it one to one with your AI, you can go back and forth and adjust and edit as needed. I think it, it's developing this skill that takes it from like translating your gut reaction that something feels off. That's your taste, your spidey sense, into something like being able to articulate why. Is it that it's failed on positioning? Is it the specificity? Is it a point of view? Is it, but you need to be able to articulate why. And going back to my previous point about learning these skills, how to articulate it, I think it's definitely something I've had to spend time on. It's communication. It's also how you name something and when it's working well, again, I think that's important as well. And then taking those examples and playing them back and loading them into the tools you're using as examples of good and bad are really important. And I think there's a huge cost that just doesn't get talked about in the time, the effort, the drain on creativity when this is done poorly. Take that one-to-one. Then you expand it out when it's a team working together with a good North Star goal. Everyone knows what we're trying to work towards, but creating something against a goal is really hard. It is hard. It's hard to take an idea and make it into a reality. So your AI, your team, back again, like putting the time in, leaders making sure that teams have training, have coaching and feedback on how to give really good feedback to others, but certainly to your AI tool, I think is really important. So specificity is really key, those examples. And again, like a very basic one that I always do, just a very practical tip, is like take the draft and read it out loud. So make myself like read it verbally, even though if it's supposed to be something written, and then record myself reading it. Because usually when you're speaking it, you'll change the nuance, the tone, etc. If that's what you're looking for in the review, is like natural human voice, then that's a really good exercise to do. I think that's something that's really, really helpful as well. But it's so important. And, I've seen so many projects stall and kind of die on the vine, really, because everyone's fed up by the kind of 7th, 8th, 9th review. I think also just the last point I'd say on reviewing, this isn't AI specific, is being very clear on the type of feedback you're looking for, and being very clear on who's your approver. That's something I've learned a lot, certainly from junior to a mid. So if I'm going in with, a hot and spicy, I don't know, competitor post is one that's always everyone's, it's good, it's great content, but it's got to be right. We've got to be very clear on what we're doing. I'm going in, I've got certain stakeholders I need to make sure are aligned, but I need to make sure it keeps true to the message. So it's not going to be watered down, it's not going to be thin, it's not going to not say anything. I will be very specific. I need from you product marketing, I need the accuracy, I need the product proof point claims. If I need, the feedback from sales, is this going to land with the customer? And I try and keep it as small as possible, but then I know who my approver is. So again, that's just basic, like that's very good, like feedback skills development, but it all applies then to AI as well. So, going through that process, if you're thinking through it, if you're just doing this with your AI tools, like how are you doing it? And it'll help you get to final output faster, just developing those skills.
Yeah, there is such an element of understanding your internal audience and your external audience, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you mentioned, product marketing is going to want the accuracy, or this team is going to want that, and thinking through that's just good practice in general. Yeah. And I love the tip of reading it out loud. Because then you're going to start to read those choppy, like 2-word sentences and the bullets and, the weird framings that always come out of AI tools, and catch them immediately, because nobody talks like that.
No. I'm not being afraid to be too. This is something, I really believe then switching to kind of my own like social, I think, or it reads too true for brands, but I think particularly on social, on a personal level, just not being too worried about being too corporate or kind of professional, quote unquote, professional sounding. Like, just people care more about if they can, like, you've got a really good message to say, and it's an interesting topic. How you say it matters. I've spoken to so many people about LinkedIn specifically, and like, oh God, the cringe factor, I could never get started. And I think a lot of that barrier maybe then is, I feel I feel self-conscious, and then they try and use AI. Okay, that's supposed to help me. Everyone tells me this is going to help. And then what comes out is just like doesn't feel like them, and then they give up. So then what I try and do is the AI does help me draft and kind of like get the scale going, but every post is me. I take it and I like, rejig it and assemble it, and, just let it be my normal voice as well. And I think definitely I would encourage that for anyone looking at content creation. Just let it be your own voice. And then when you're thinking about, bigger asset production, you've got those guidelines and frameworks to work within, but don't just take the drafts verbatim and think of it as shipped.
Yeah, definitely. That's across the board. please ever take anything that was delivered by AI and
Yeah.
not edited at all. But yes, great tips. Now, when you're kind of working on a team, potentially it's just an individual, effort, but depending on how big your team is, it could be like a real group effort, like you're saying. So you might have different SEO or AEO folks that are different from a writer or a designer, whoever put the brief together in the first place.
Mhm.
Talk about the importance of having an internal story owner, and what role is that, and why does that matter in terms of the broader content operations?
Yeah, I love that. So I think it's super important. So I've talked a lot about how hiring and resourcing at the moment is the most like exciting time to think about pulling talent together for your team, for your marketing team overall, but it's also the most challenging. So if you think about, it can be quite a complex mix of full-time folks. You've got freelancers you bring in, you've got AI, you've got, other teammates. So it's quite a complicated mix of people maybe that aren't onboarded or not. They're only coming in for a certain project. So I think having someone, or at least, I don't, yes, it could be one person. Some people do have an internal comms head, which is great. I think having someone on a project to be fully like up on, how is this going to resonate? Is it clear? Does sales understand this? Does product understand it? To marketing? Is everyone on the same page? Because very often it doesn't end up that way in practice. Everyone's running a million miles an hour. So I think, again, it's not a committee, it's not like a quarterly workshop that we go to and then forget about. It's the person that is accountable for making sure that everyone's on the same page and can spot when the drift starts to happen and flag it and help address it. I think that's really, really important. Typically, there's roles like integrated campaign manager or the orchestration role. I think some people really lean into it naturally. I really enjoy it. So I think I've always leaned into this role more in my career, but it's definitely that kind of orchestrator role, someone who cares about that consistency, but also can look across channels, so they can see things across the bigger picture of like LinkedIn, or whether it's like a big brand effort or in a sales play. We'll spend time like assessing that and kind of making sure that's all consistent as well. Yeah, and I think, honestly, like the opportunity with AI is great in that respect, but then it will make when it goes wrong, it makes it worse, because you need that person who can see the drift. Because if you think, you're creating at scale, if you don't have someone keeping an eye on it, it's just going to, exponentially grow as well.
Yeah, that's so true. I think it's interesting that it's not like a specific role, like this person should be the internal story owner. It's just that there are some people that are naturally gravitating towards like protecting the brand, protecting the voice, and to lean into that, but to name it as well, so that there's clarity around, someone's looking out for this as a whole. So no one's assuming someone else is doing it, but also, not assuming they're doing it if
Exactly.
someone else is, right?
There's definitely a kind of like base, like, everyone cares about like brand
Of course.
consistency, quality, etc., campaign results, if it's a campaign example, but it's then that person, like, rather than it being subjective, it's someone who's going to be proactively doing the reviews and the scoring I talked about, like doing that on a regular basis, spot checking, and can go in with those teams workshop. Maybe it's even like someone with the skills who'll like pull back into the AI tooling and think, hey, you know what, this isn't working very well. Let's get those instructions set up. Let's feed it a couple more examples. I've definitely seen more of these job roles or job specs like out in the market now. It's definitely a new evolving role, but I think it's still, some of them are very tooling heavy. And then you've got an integrated campaign manager. I just think it has to be that blend of two. And then someone who can also think, hey, you know what, like this needs to go into our freelancer pool. Like, how do we help them quickly get on board and use the taste guide, to help people who are coming in on maybe a seasonal basis. So it's not easy, and it's not something that's a one and done, but it's a very exciting role, I think, to pull in as well.
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk about the performance. Now, in theory, we've already established what success looks like before in the brief, right? So what about when content underperforms? You've produced something, you had an established goal, and it's not quite reaching that. A lot of teams might like reformat into a different type of content piece. But you've got a sort of diagnostic reflex that you talk about. Can you walk us through what that looks like and what content optimization strategies you're using?
Yeah, I think it's a really great question. So for sure, hopefully we've aligned on what something is supposed to do, and given the right goals and objectives for a certain piece of content, it's very easy to do something and just put a line that something's gonna. Everyone's talking about, pipeline, influence pipeline's the big thing. So, again, like it's very easy to say we'll be measuring this in influence pipeline, but it may not be the right goal for so we're just going to assume that we're all aligned and we feel good as well about how to measure it, where to go look for that information, how to interrogate the information. You'd be surprised again, like I've worked in teams where you've got very creative folks that are also on the hook for content performance, but have never been given the kind of training or don't have that skill set to think about the data. So you've got to have this kind of the diagnostic reflex I talk about is like someone who's creative but also curious in terms of like can interrogate the numbers, spot those patterns. So in terms of content, I would say it's starting with, again, like looking at the brief, looking at what do we think is happening. I think also having the context of what is going on in the market as well. Trust, attention, everything's going a bit crazy. Campaigns effectiveness is not as much as before, and people are, some things that going to individual level, content's working really well, and it is harder and harder to attribute. So with all of that context in mind, what I would do instead of thinking, well, this didn't work, so we need more of why, again, like looking at how can you and look at those numbers, look at the performance, and then just see what maybe there's some tweaks, optimizations. It could be repurposing into a different format, trying a different hook, etc. Like but not having a one and done mindset. Something that I've always wanted to, have that mentality in the teams I'm running, constantly refreshing articles or assets that are produced. It's super important for AI visibility, as well as search. So again, it's like having your eye on the numbers and knowing how to interrogate those numbers, and then also being ready ready if something isn't working to kind of give it its time, kill it, and then move on. It's nice to have, again, like another piece I have is having this backlog of like tests and experiments you want to run, have that experimentation mindset. So you can always have something that you get back to try to see what's going to uncover better results, a new channel, a new, format that you haven't tried yet as well. But the worst is when it kind of, again, like it's thinking about going to more, like it's never going to just be, well, this one doesn't work, let's do 5 or 10 more. You've really got to understand the pattern and the why as well, start point.
Yeah, for sure. I love what you said about interrogating the data. My team will laugh because we've had this conversation in the past where, someone will come and say, great news, this content piece is outperforming all the others, or this social post or this email or whatever. Great. Like, what is it about that piece of content that is outperforming the others? And it's like, oh, well, I'm not sure, right? It just ends at the good news, or maybe the other way around, the bad news. Like this didn't perform as well. Well, let's figure out why and look for the patterns. Or there was a big jump in web traffic this month from direct traffic. Great. Why did that happen? What else was going on? And so I think asking yourself why, like 3 or 4 times. Don't stop until you get to the real, like, what am I going to do with this information? And I think for creatives, sometimes that data-driven muscle isn't always natural, but if you can get it right, it really enables that more creativity. Because like you said, if you're running experiments and you're trying new things, like being really data driven will allow you to be more creative and to try those different things, because then you'll know right away when something is outperforming something else and what you can replicate, and like what an opportunity that is, rather than just kind of doing everything the same all the time.
Yeah.
following your process. This one worked, this one didn't. Good news, bad news. Like there's no
Mhm.
good news and bad news. This is all information that you can use to do something different the next time. And what a thrill that is to like try
Yeah.
something different. You have to be trying something different all the time because the algorithms are changing. The
Mhm.
world is changing. How people consume content is changing on a daily basis. So what worked
Mhm.
6 months ago or a week ago may
Yeah.
not work again. So
Yeah.
I just love the like interrogate the data. It's such a great way to say it, and
Mhm.
just like digging in deep, like why is this happening,
Yeah.
and using that information to try something
Yeah.
different or the same another time.
Yeah, and I think from experience of being on big teams and now,
Mhm.
smaller teams with other clients, I think it can be easier in the latter because there's less kind of silos to go across. So, you said website traffic is a perfect example. Organic traffic to websites are down overall. I did a lot of, external content on this at Optimizely as well. We noticed this pattern really, really early where people are consuming content off platform, off your site in other spaces. Okay, great. So then you go work with the events team, you work with the social team. But if when it's a team of small and you can or you're the kind of CMO, you've got that orchestrated overarching view, you can pull those levers, that is when you can have that impact. But it can be difficult when you're in the silos to think, well, my bit newsletters are here and emails here and this is going here. So I think it is tricky, but it definitely, again, like that's the role of a really strong leadership team to kind of do that orchestration and pull the team like working together and assign the kind of
Yeah,
resources in that way.
for sure. And even that, just that curiosity that you mentioned, to like, go over to your colleague and say, I'm noticing this happening.
Yeah.
Is this something that you're seeing, or is there something we can learn from each other? Right. Because you're right. There might be some silos in place and not necessarily knowing, especially, if organic traffic is down, when direct traffic is up, something you
Yeah.
can't really attribute to anything
Yeah.
directly,
Yeah.
then you need to understand what the other teams are doing, and what could be driving a surge in interest, and that
Mhm.
implied attribution. There has to be alignment, but you won't be looking for it without that curiosity that you mentioned, like,
Yeah.
even asking the question.
I think so. And it should be feeding back into content, like feeding your cycle of creation or refreshing as well. Like if something's working in one channel, again, that perfect example, like we definitely saw folks were much more, the machines and the humans were much more informed coming to the website than they used to be. So the content on the site needs to be kind of like your shop floor, your, very like further into the buyer journey, whereas actually a lot of content that was more kind of awareness, and we see everyone like this off platform, it's just about getting attention, awareness, being in community. That's got to happen off site. That was the pattern that we saw overall. So you're right, having that curiosity, having that mindset, but also then again, like the skills and abilities. Certainly, I think with AI visibility, it's such a new area, and I think a lot of folks struggle, myself included, at the beginning to kind of figure out what on earth these prompt tracking is and how that
Mhm.
impact translates further down the funnel. But again, there's so many resources out there now. You just have to go and educate yourself and listen to the smart folks that are talking a lot about it, because it's so important, and it gives you that wedge into the wider business who are curious about it but don't really and maybe understand it as much. Like, why is my customer sending me something from ChatGPT, and why is this? And you have that unique position then to kind of help them be more informed.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, so I want to hear about the transformation that kind of takes place when people are following these processes overall.
Mhm.
You've worked with clients in your fractional capacity, or at companies as head of content to put these layers in place. Can you talk about what that success looks like on the other side in terms of quality, the team confidence, the output once that judgment layer is built out?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, again, like I've got my two biggest examples would say, Optimizely, I built a content team. We built it out from sort of two content marketers right out to six by the time I finished up there. And that, again, not just the team, but we really, built the AI powered infrastructure of content overall. This is quite early on in the day. So, all the work we did around agentic workflows, I think the team itself, I was very, very stringent on like hiring the kind of talent that I wanted to bring into the team, and was really proud of the people that we were bringing in that are, a lot of them are still there, that are very talented, have great judgment, great taste themselves overall, and have that curious growth mindset. But then also all the processes that come in place when you take a team from, triple it in size and bring in different aspects of, sales content as well as traditional content marketing. So, really for me, it was implementing all the right processes. I talked about like the strategy, the reviews, the quarterly refresh cycles, partnering with the digital team on all of the thousands of assets that needed to be created and refreshed on that ongoing basis. So thinking about the first prompt library we built and the production workflows that cut that first draft time, I think it was about 25% overall, which is huge, for a team of that size, to really free them up to spend time instead of assembling content. It's on that judgment, on the review, on the editorial, on the feedback, portion as well. And then I'd say, at Personio, we did a lot of work right at the beginning of my time there, thinking about, content reviews and refresh. So we had a lot of content that needed, a 4,000 plus asset library, identified a good chunk of that needed to be refreshed, optimized, and retired straight away across multiple domains. So again, coming into a role where you're thinking, okay, what's in this world of AI pulling, you're building your brand as you are, you've got all these assets that need to be actioned. It was a lot big work stream there, kicking off that pruning and optimization program. And I think it saved us at least 10 hours a month. I think it was much more than that in team capacity time. So I had a big team, but again, like stretched across multiple different aspects of content production. So it could move us more. I was able to move more of the team over to how I call it, like high signal work. So the kind of unique first party and data analysis, working with the product team on those insights that are going to be create those like pillar pieces of content then going forward. So yeah, I think those two are probably the best examples. There's tons more, but I'd say thinking about like when they're all in place, it's the key thing. It's not just about AI, although AI is just making it all come to the forefront. A lot of this is good practice, like the feedback, assembling a great team, having good talent, and making sure they're orchestrated and working well together. But I think not forgetting about AI is the thing now. You're not just training a team. You're not just putting in a person that runs email, person that runs events. You've got that richer resourcing plan that includes agents and AI overall. So these steps and the framework I've put together, certainly I'd say of all of them, the taste guides being the most helpful for people I'm working with. But having that, you've got to have that in place to keep the structure around the scaling content you're producing.
Yeah, absolutely. I love all that. And I love too that you talk about the efficiency gains and the time savings. Just using AI alone is not going to get you that time savings. You touched on this, right? Like just using AI isn't necessarily faster. I just had this conversation with a friend last week. Like if you want to talk to Claude in the middle of the night, Claude will talk to you all night. Yeah. So it's not necessarily going to save you time just because you're using AI. But having a framework in place, having the right training materials, having a process, that's where the efficiency can come in. So there's a little bit of upfront work that has to happen to build up that process, the taste guides, the instructions, the workflows, and train your teams as well as the agents to then find those efficiencies and that time savings in a way that's going to maintain consistency and credibility for your brand.
Right. And also we didn't get into AI strategy overall, but like starting with, the easiest win that I found across all of those examples is starting with the the dishwasher tasks or the laundry tasks. So thinking about, okay, how can you, this is something that, Optimizely we talked about a lot, the laundry, how can you get AI to do your laundry so that you can go ahead and do the more fun stuff? So, make a list of 10 things you've done in a month or a week. Probably a week is enough because we've all got a lot of tasks that you hate, that are boring and take a load of time. Just writing them down, they're your first movers when it comes to AI, and doing that across a team. And then you can start to add in variables like commercial impact or things that, again, it depends on your AI strategy. But if you're thinking, again, like practical, I like doing like practical little steps forward. Write down like 5 to 10 things that you hate doing, that take up a load of time, and that can be take ages. So that, like, those couple of things, and then just start thinking, okay, well, how could I automate some of this? And campaign setup is the biggie, like for our campaigns team, when you can start to have that agentic process, or customer workflows is another big one I've been working on with another client. So there's things like that. So that can help you. Pointing it in the right into the right direction is key.
Yeah, I love that. It's a great tip to, just make that list of things, the laundry tasks. I'm going to use that and see what you can automate, and see, again, we talk about this on our team, like, what are the tasks that only you can do as a human with your human life experience?
Yeah.
And then if the things that don't fall into that category of things only you can do, those are the things that we want to automate. And, the team has done a great job at creating some interesting skills, not specific to content. Sometimes it is, but just in general, that enable people to do, I forget what you called it, but like the high intent or the high value task.
Yeah, that's
high
it.
impact.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. This was such a great conversation, and I love just hearing from all these different experts. You mentioned in the beginning, everybody's kind of figuring this out differently, and so important to learn from each other on how we're tackling this stuff. And I just so appreciate your time today and sharing your framework with us.
Oh, thanks, Jen. It's been such a pleasure. Honestly, I've really enjoyed it. Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. And thanks for being here for our 100th episode.
Happy 100th.
Thank you, everyone, for listening in today. Make sure you're following Julia on LinkedIn. She's got a lot of great stuff to say, as I'm sure you've just heard. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to Marketing Demystified wherever you get your podcasts, and join us next time for more conversations that